we are going to come right back. Everybody hang tight. All right, greetings and welcome back to the second hour of Dr. J Radio Live. Well, a little past that, 10 after 8 p.m. Pacific Time, 11:10 Eastern Time in the Pacific, or in the PM post meridian. And of course, where Johnny Webb is, 4:10 a.m. GMT Greenwich Mean Time. You are listening to the one and only Dr. J Radio Live, truly syndicated international show bringing you news to the masses of the world. And of course, I always say this: the beginning of the show, the end of the show, and at break. Remember, folks, the only thing you need to remember is the name of the show, Dr. J Radio Live, DRJ Radio Live. That is the same name as the website and every social media name you could think of. Everything is under that. I can't even list them all because there's so many. I mean, I would start with, I guess, from Skype, Facebook, YouTube. Definitely check out YouTube. That's where we archive things once they circle back to us from all the other networks. And speaking of networks, we also want to thank Late Night in the Midlands, the terrestrial radio, iTunes, Shoutcast, TuneIn.com, PSN Radio, and in the UK, thanks to Johnny, Deprogrammed Radio, and Pulse Talk Radio, which is our newest and our very own coast-to-coast PM radio network, which we have quite a few shows on, and we are building them. I'm scrutinizing them very carefully because I've gotten a lot of requests for people to join that network. So there's only 4 regular shows on there, but that's because I wanted people who are people who are not new hosts, people who just didn't start on Blog Talk a couple weeks ago. Anyhow, the other things you should remember is Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, Tumblr, like I said, Facebook already, YouTube, Slack, Minds.com, just whatever you could think of, Reddit. It's all under DRJ Radio Live. So, like I said, we got Johnny Webb in the United Kingdom, and right here we have, of course, the one and only Tim Swartz. So, Mr. Tim, before we jump on to a continuation of these topics or jumping into Mojave, let's plug in your stuff. And before I do that, let me remind everybody that all you have to do is go to drjradiolive.com, click on books and videos, scroll down to Tim Swartz, and then it'll click on it. It'll take you to his authors page, both with the Timothy Green Beckley's site as well as the Amazon page to find all the books he's written and also contributed as a co-author. So, Tim, before I pass it on to Johnny, who's got a note that he's been saving, what do you have, any other websites or anything you'd like to promote, any upcoming lectures, and also plug in your radio show?
Oh yeah, well, you can listen to myself and Tim Beckley on Exploring the Bizarre, which is heard Thursday nights at 10 o'clock Eastern on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. and a 2 hour long program. We're the hosts, so we get to talk to all kinds of interesting people, and of course, any show that has Tim Beckley on, it's you just never know what's going to happen.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, he loves doing radio interviews, like your show, Dr. J. But I tell you something, he really has a passion now for being the host of his own program. Because he gets to ask people questions, and then he gets to tell his own stories too. Based on whatever answers he's getting. So yeah, that's Exploring the Bizarre, 10 o'clock Eastern Time, Thursday nights on KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Everybody, make sure you check that out. And is it in your bio? Because then, if it is, then obviously people can click on the link and hear you in 48 hours from now. You'll be midway through your show. Am I right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, everybody, make sure you check that out. And before the end of the show, I'm going to have Tim plug this in yet again. But now, let's turn over to Johnny Webb to see, go to his question that he's had. Go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, Tim, obviously you wrote extensively about Admiral Byrd and Project High Jump, and I wanted to ask you, when Admiral Byrd went looking for the German base New Schwabenland, what was found there, and why did they have to come away so quick?
Yeah, that's that's the big question there, Johnny. No, officially, the whole Operation High Jump was supposed to be like an exploratory mission, looking for minerals and new lands and things like that in Antarctica. But the other side of this mission supposedly was that it was supposed to be kind of like a training operation, to train troops on how to deal with Arctic conditions, under the fear that the Soviet Union was going to try to invade the United States by, coming over the northern polar regions, which leaves us to ask, why didn't they just, why did they assemble this huge Navy flotilla? A submarine, aircraft carrier, just all kinds of ships, a couple thousands of sailors to go all the way to Antarctica when they just could have gone up, like to Alaska or even into like Canada, the Yukon, places like that. So we really don't have a clear understanding on just what Operation High Jump was all about. Speculation over the years was that they went down there looking for this secret Nazi base that was allegedly built in Antarctica. I mean, we've got some pretty good stories from these Nazi U-boat captains who surrendered in Argentina at the end of the war. They at least two, possibly up to five of these U-boats had been missing for a number of months after the end of the war, and nobody knew where they went to. And a couple of the captains, under debriefing and interrogation, said that they had dropped off supplies, equipment, personnel of various kind to this secret base in Antarctica. So I think that was probably one of the major reasons that they had assembled this very huge Navy operation to go down there. And you have to remember also that, when they put this all together, the war was over with, and a lot of these ships were being decommissioned. We didn't need them anymore. And then just all of a sudden, they brought them up again, fixed them up, got them operating, loaded them up with sailors, and went down there for what was going to be at least a 6-month mission. And instead, it ended up being about 6 weeks. And go ahead.
what do you make, Tim, of the memoirs of Admiral Byrd, where he talks about being in a flight and then his flight being sort of hijacked in a sense, and he was taken to what was called the inner earth and spoke with some higher beings, and so there's a mention of an inner earth or an opening to an inner earth. There was a mentioning of green pastures and warm seas at body temperature. What do you make of that?
Right. Well, Tim Beckley's Inner Light Global Communications has this book. It's called like The Secret Lost Diaries of Admiral Byrd. Anybody who's interested in it, get yourself a copy because it's very interesting. And this book popped up sometime probably in the late 1950s, early 1960s as a samizdat. And if you're not familiar with that term, that is a manuscript that is copied and recopied and copied and recopied and recopied, and given to one person, they'll make a copy of it, and then they'll give it to somebody else. So for a number of years, that's how it went around, and then finally, it ended up being professionally published. Gosh, Tim Beckley may have been the first to officially publish it. Maybe not. There may have been somebody earlier who did a small publication of it. But in this manuscript, it talks about, this supposedly is Admiral Byrd's mission diary of an airplane flight, him and his navigator, over the North Polar regions in 1947, oddly enough, at the very same time that he was in Antarctica participating in Operation High Jump. Now, in this diary, he relates an experience on how their plane was overtaken by UFOs, flying saucers that were sporting the Nazi insignia, the swastika. And they were instructed over through radio communication to follow these ships, and they were taken into a very large cavern. They haven't. Some people have said it was like the northern polar opening, but that. Pretty certain that doesn't exist, though. There must have been some
opening in Antarctica. I know this because there's a lot of videos.
Well, we're talking about the North Pole here, and you have to remember that the Arctic there's no land there. It's just all it's ice covering water. Mm-hmm. So unless they were able to go underground in like one of the like island chains that circumnavigates it, it's hard to say. But anyway, they ended up in an underground realm where they were met by a race of basically human-looking people who lived underground, but with higher technology naturally, and it's they were given the same kind of message that we've heard the old UFO contactees, like George Adamski and Howard Menger, that the surface people, they've come too far with their love of atomic weapons, and that we were going to blow ourselves to hell and back, if we didn't stop it, and if we weren't going to stop it, then they were going to step in and stop it for us. And then go ahead.
If I can just jump in again. It seems to be like a chronology of time where, in the 30s, you've got the Nazis supposedly interacting with aliens, creating the Nazi belt, later going down to New Swabia and creating a secret base down there. Then we have, obviously, Admiral Byrd coming into direct contact with these Nazi-type Bell alien craft in the South Atlantic. And then, shortly after that, in the sort of early 50s, we then get Eisenhower, who disappears for a very secret meeting. He's gone for a few hours, and we understand that he's gone and done a deal with the Nordics. So we've got Nordics, we've got aliens down in the South Atlantic, and we've got these aliens that the Germans are dealing with in the 30s.
Right.
Are we talking different species? Or are we talking all of the same alien?
Well,
or are they aliens?
I would let me say one thing real quick, Johnny, to you, Tim. Although what Admiral Byrd saw in these flying saucers of the swastika, everybody associates it with Germany, right? Nazi Germany. However, that insignia is so old, you can find it in antiquity. So what if these craft are really thousands of years old, right? Or and they're just using the same insignia, or maybe they're new models with the same insignia and have nothing to do with the Nazis. That's one thing. But anyway, go ahead and answer Johnny's question. I just wanted to point out the fact that the swastika is an occult symbol that goes back to antiquity. It was not invented by Hitler in any way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, in the Lost Diaries of Admiral Byrd, I think that is what they are implying in it, is that, these craft aren't Nazi craft, that instead the swastika is being used as like the Tibetan sun sign.
Yes.
Type
my
of
understanding
situation.
is, though, gentlemen, but when you look at Nazi photographs of, say, called the Bell or the Hannibal and two craft, you're not seeing a swastika. You're seeing the German cross, which is a typical flying cross that you saw on the side of aircraft.
Right.
And in this case, on these UFOs, on these Hannibals or whatever they're called. But what's your take on the Hannibal 1 and 2, the Vril, the German? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what's your thoughts on these? Are these technologies that we're seeing implemented today by our military?
Well, Johnny, let me go back and kind of answer your previous question. My theory about the whole Admiral Byrd and the his airplane flight to the North Pole was actually, I think it was disinformation covering up the fact that what actually happened to him down in Antarctica at the same time. Because he wasn't in the North Pole being kidnapped by underground flying saucers. He was actually in Antarctica, looking probably for a German base, which I don't know if he actually found it or not. And that was may have been one of the reasons why they left so early, even though he did tell some of the embedded reporters afterwards that he was going to come back to the United States and tell Congress that we had to be extremely careful because the United States risked being attacked by missiles, as he put it, coming from the polar regions. So I think that there is this implication of a fear of Nazi, possibly / alien invasion by the United States. That there was this idea that the Nazis had come in contact with an extraterrestrial race, either through physical, say like they had found their own crashed UFO, which there's been some stories circulating with that. Or if you go back even further, back in the 1920s, where you had these occult groups who allegedly contacted extraterrestrials through supernatural means and had garnered certain types of technology, and then possibly even produced manifestations of these Nordic types of extraterrestrials. There does seem to be an interesting jump in technology, especially pretty close to the end of the war, that seems to have some supernatural dealing, so to speak. I mean, you have these, like you asked, Johnny, like the Hannibal and some of these other a type of possibly anti-gravity types of craft. Whether or not they probably hadn't gotten to the point where they were all that successful or easy to operate. Else the end of the war may have ended up a lot different. We do know that a lot of these scientists ended up in South America. Possibly the base in Antarctica was more of a red herring so to speak, and that everybody that was anybody ended up in various places in South America, trying to continue their experiments. We know that the Perón government put in a lot of money to develop nuclear and other types of exotic technologies using a Nazi scientist. And interesting enough, there were a lot of places in Argentina, Paraguay, and Chile where people were reporting seeing these very tall Nordic types of people who didn't quite appear human, and some of the investigators attributed to these were just like blonde Nazis, blonde Germans, but from some of the descriptions that we got, they sound an awful lot like the very same beings that were coming out of the 1950 UFOs and talking to Howard Menger and George Adamski. And it's interesting that the one of the main thing that they were very interested in is for us to stop our atomic experiments. Get rid of our nuclear weapons. They were saying, oh well, it's affecting the solar system and other planets and everything like that. Well, that's probably pretty unlikely unless there's something about atomic blast that we don't quite understand. However, go ahead.
I'm sorry to stop you there. I was going to say, if we go to Google and we look at the map of Antarctica, and we go to the region of, say, New Schwabenland, which was, said it was in the 50s and 60s, we always find these areas are completely sort of blacked out in a sense of, we don't have that high definition that we have, say, dead in the center of the South Pole. But, New Schwabenland seems to be blocked out. Is there a New Schwabenland today? I know we have New Schwabia, a remote sort of listening post and experiment center in the South Atlantic. But, it's with today's understanding, was there a reason to go there and it got shut down like most things from the former Soviet Union days, where they were running in the 50s and 60s very quietly, no one knew anything about them, but come the 70s and 80s, when people actually do find out about these things, they're long and closed down, and you'll see all these underground bunkers and thick concrete bases in mountains, but they're all redundant. Is there any new news about New Schwabenland? Is it a redundant area? Is it still an active area? Is there a peace treaty between Western governments that they go to each other's bases now? What's your understanding of it today?
Well, when it comes to the alleged Nazi base in Antarctica, I think that it was there at one time, and possibly one of the reasons that that Admiral Byrd went there. It may not have been an invasion; it may have actually have been a diplomatic mission, which is why it ended a lot earlier than it was supposed to. However, as for today, I sincerely doubt if it's still there. You have Joseph Farrell pointed this out, very very eloquently. I think, to keep something like that in operation for an extended period of time takes an awful lot of energy, and unless they, as some people have alleged, unless they have found some kind of like hot springs or or some way to tap into some kind of say a geothermal system, you're constantly having to bring in diesel and gasoline or coal or oil or whatever. That's a pretty expensive proposition, especially for a government that doesn't exist anymore, and it just exists, clandestine, on a clandestine scale.
We did have Eisenhower warn us about the military-industrial complex and the problems that we could have facing the future with that. But going back to Eisenhower, on his time where it did disappear, and this isn't not just a speculation, this is noted history. This guy disappeared and went on a mission to meet extraterrestrials. Can you elaborate on that and tell us a bit any more that you know about that?
Eisenhower's experience. That was I think what you're referring to is when allegedly a UFO landed Holloman Air Force Base, and then Eisenhower showed up and was part of this intergalactic or interplanetary liaison, and in fact there's been some very interesting evidence that's come out. I mean, just people who were there at the time, like radar operators and just regular personnel who were questioned years later, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we remember that. It happened." They may not have been privy to what the conversations were or anything like that, but apparently it was pretty well known on the base that something extraordinary was taking place. That like I said, they may not have had all the information, and a lot of the non-essential personnel were told to stay in their barracks, and don't come out until we tell you to. But those who were in, say, like the control tower and people, places like that, yeah, they knew what was going on. They knew that Eisenhower had flown in, to meet with these beings. But see, now this is another one of these scenarios where, excuse me, where I wonder whether or not we were actually given the God's honest truth by whatever these things were. I think one of the reasons that that we have the whole UFO secrecy, there's a couple of reasons. Okay, one of them is that we can't admit to the population that that there are things flying around in our skies and we can't do anything to stop them. I mean, if the general population found that out, nowadays, I mean, people are so used to the idea of, extraterrestrials, through cartoons and pulp culture and things like that. It may not have been, quite the shock it was, say, like back in the 50s or 60s. But still, I mean, they're not, at this point, they're so caught up in their lie that I think the whole controversy would be, what, you kept this secret from us from all this time? What else have you kept secret from us? And I think the other thing is that, we don't know what these things are. They could be extraterrestrials, like they said. They could be time travelers. They could be Nazis. Hiding in the still hiding in the South American jungles, flying around in their flying saucers, saying that they're extraterrestrials, and this is part of their whole Fourth Reich plan. Somehow. So, I think that, these experiences did happen, and that, our government and military knows that this stuff is true. They just don't know what it is. I think that they have been, after they had these experiences and were told stories and stuff, that they later found out that they weren't true. And they're left basically just as confused as the rest of us, except that they know that it's real. They know definitively that it's real. They just don't know what it is.
Well, we're coming up to about 20 minutes before the end of the show, and I just want to change gears a bit and ask you about Spirit Radio. I remember a few years ago that Congress had a whole session where Spirit Radio was set up in front of them, and this gentleman done a demonstration where he contacted the dead, and I wonder what you can tell us about that.
Oh, well, I mean, there's all kinds of different types of spirit radios out there now. I mean, you've got the ones that I think that they travel like across the frequencies, at a very rapid scale, and various words, will pop out. A lot of times having meaning, and some of these types of spirit radios, I just I don't know. I mean, the whole idea of using the radio spectrum and then having it automatically pull out these words. It's I just it makes me wonder sometimes just how accurate they would actually be. The radio free spectrum on planet Earth is so crowded now that there's so much electromagnetic pollution that I'm not sure if this would be an accurate way to do it. Now, I'm not sure just exactly, what type of system that they used on the show that you were referring to.
It was called a spirit com.
Spiritcom. Okay, well, is that similar to the George Meeks Spiritcom from back in the 1980s? Are you familiar with that
Yeah,
one?
yeah, it is, and I think there was an Italian gentleman as well called Giuseppe something,
Oh
and he
yeah,
said
yeah,
well that
yeah. I,
it actually picked up tones and accents, and so you could hear a real voice rather than just a digitized sound in a sense.
Right. Well, those I have a little bit more confidence of their reality than some of these ones that they're, that some of these like ghost hunters use on these reality shows.
Like you say, yeah, that's just really sort of jargon that's getting picked up on the airways. Where I see what you're saying, and no, I don't actually mean in that regard. Those modern ones, like you said, where it jumps to different words from different
right.
channels. I'm not really comfortable with that being an absolute. But with the spirit com, where questions are asked and answers are given, and it's the same voice. It's not thousands of different channel voices. It's one voice coming through continually. Very, very, for me, it frightened me because, it was real voices coming through of the dead. In this case, it was a gentleman who'd used this spirit com machine himself before and taught the gentleman how to use it. And then when he died, they had an agreement that he would come back. And lo and behold, he came back. And he came back in front of Congress. So Congress was listening to this gentleman's concept and his idea. They wanted to question him regarding, the other side. And he demonstrated it clearly. And as I say, he was bringing up the dead. And I wondered, 'cause I was looking at your books and you mentioned Spirit Radio. And I wondered if that was what you were talking about. But it sounds like you were talking about the latter side.
Yeah, very well. Tesla was doing experiments along those lines after he received what he determined was intelligent signals back in it was 1899 at his laboratory in Colorado Springs. Those were more almost like Morse code types of signals, but it kind of started a fire burning within him, and he did a lot of research for like the rest of his life, along the same lines as you were talking about. I mean, he developed receivers and even transmitters that were working on frequencies that normally aren't conducive for human voice transmission. Yet he was receiving, intelligent voices, sometimes in English, sometimes in other foreign languages. Sometimes he said that he thought that he may have been picking up voice transmissions from extraterrestrials. He didn't refer to them as extraterrestrials. That's more of a modern term. So, I mean, yeah, I would like to believe that there is more to our life than just what we experience on on the material coil. That there is some part of us, our spirit, consciousness, whatever you have it, that survives after death, and that it continues on afterwards, and that it can communicate. I mean, we've ever since the dawn of the technological age, there have been some very interesting receptions of what allegedly seems to be voices from those who have passed on. I mean, and not just radio. Like the Italian gentleman you were referring to, who he gave a number of very fascinating, demonstrations of two-way conversations, between him and his guest, and then whoever was broadcasting on the other side. But I mean, you've had a telephone, people getting telephone calls from allegedly those who have passed on. It's gone to the point now where people are getting text messages on emails, supposedly from loved ones who have passed on. Um, I mean, again, I don't want to go and throw my hat, completely into that ring and say, yes, this is definite proof of life after death, because as soon as you do that, the phenomena has a maddening way of taking a right angle turn and doing something else. So
I've got a last question I wanted to ask you, and it's sort
sure.
of just on the sort of subject, but you know, are ghosts, demons, and aliens one of the same thing? Are we being deceived? What's your take on those three subjects?
Well, I think I think I think it's a little from column A and a little, from column B. I mean, I don't believe that you should go and throw the baby out with the bathwater on everything, just because that there could actually be, evil entities out there who are up to no good. I do think that is a real probability. I mean, just like that there are mean and evil people, here on planet Earth, there's probably the same thing in, like the spirit world, the ultra dimensional beings. There's probably, what we would refer to as like spiritual parasites, elemental types of things that prey off of us. They prey off of our, say, like out of our fear and emotions and things like that. And it seems like that there are things like that enjoy taking on different guises and pretending that they're your great Aunt Martha, who's come back from the dead to give you her old recipe for black bean soup. But then again. I think that great Aunt Martha, if she has the ability, can come through and talk for a while as well. You just, when you're dealing with anything of the paranormal and the supernatural, you always have to approach it with great caution. You don't believe anything that they tell you. I mean, it's interesting what they tell you, but as soon as you start believing in it, then that's where you can get caught up. I investigated a case years ago where these college girls were talking on the Ouija board, and this entity came through and said that he was the spirit of a lover that this girl had in a previous life, and that he had come back. Now that he came back and he had found her, he wasn't going to let her go again. And then pretty soon this thing kind of developed almost like a vampire type of personality. She would see it in her apartment, and she said it was tall and pale with dark hair, and she started to become bulimic and anemia, and there was like poltergeist phenomena in her house, and eventually she ended up passing. She died from bulimia. Whether or not there was a connection to her experiences and then her kind of unexpected death at a young age, it's hard to say. But I always tell people, just don't take this stuff seriously.
Yeah, this is actually what I was gonna say. Bulimia could very, very easily be caused by some sort of mental breakdown, by someone telling you something, right? If you are a woman who's very, because us men look in women and we want more beauty than they care about us. They want more of a heart, breadwinner, so on and so forth, right? Mm-hmm. So if this spirit said it was a dead lover and then started pointing out to her and maybe messing with her head, I could easily see how two things happen. One, that spirit was lying to her. And two, she developed bulimia purely because of what this spirit, who may or may not have been what it represented itself to. So I like to point that out, because you're right. Don't take this to heart. Don't take this to the point where it's going to kill you.
Well, it's just like if you got on your telephone and just dialed a number at random, and expecting that you're going to talk to somebody that that's not going to happen. It's the same way when you start having seances or playing on the Ouija board or things like that. What makes you think that that you're going to contact the person that you're trying to contact? There's a lot of stuff in the astral world, so to speak, and plenty of entities that are really, really close to us on the in the material world. I mean, I think that there's kind of like a hierarchy of vibrations, for want of a better word, and those that are in a plane that are lower vibration, closer to us, probably aren't the ones that you want to be hanging around with and talking to. It's like going down to your local dive. I mean, are you going to start hanging around? Maybe some people are, but hanging around and talking to some of the skeevy people who are in places like that. Yeah, it's the same way with with the spirit world. Just because these people are just because these things are saying that they're something else, they're probably not.
Agreed. Now, since we are coming literally 10 minutes, that includes, of course, both of our promos. I want to focus on something you told me right before we got on air, which was the newest book that you wrote or co-wrote, American Strange and is it Super Mysteries? I think, is that what it's called?
America's Strange and Supernatural History.
Yes. Now let's talk a little bit about that book. And you said it's got a lot of articles and stories that you like. Can you tell us, say, the top 3 stories that you think would be the most impactful to people?
Oh, sure. Well, one of my favorites in there is about spontaneous human combustion. That's where people for no reason at all just suddenly burst into flames and reduced to ashes in just a matter of either a few minutes or an hour. There's been a number of cases here in the United States where that has happened. And that they really didn't get a lot of press coverage or anything like that. Somebody died by a fire. But I talked to some who investigated these cases. I mean, these were guys who had seen all their careers. People die by fires, and yet some of these cases of spontaneous human combustion just had them just completely flummoxed. They had never seen anything like it. They had never seen somebody who basically was just reduced to ashes. That is an almost impossible. And despite what the skeptics and debunkers say, no, you can't just go and like fall asleep in an easy chair, be a fat person, fall asleep in an easy chair, drop your cigarette, and then your fat feeds the flame, and you just kind of just slowly over a matter of 10 or 20 hours just turn into ashes. That doesn't happen. There's always quite a bit left over. So that's that's a favorite one of mine. Another one is Strange Things That Fall from the Sky. And one of my favorite cases is in Kentucky, which actually, I mean, this has happened, is kind of south of where I live, closer more to the Tennessee border, though, in the 19th century, where meat fell from the sky, chunks of meat. And I mean, it fell over a pretty large area, like a couple of miles, and it wasn't just like say like of course, they didn't have them there, but it wasn't like, say, like a cat got into a, what do you call it, like a wood chopper, and shot its remains out over the neighborhood. No, I mean they found this meat on the top of trees, roofs of houses, draped over fences, things like that. There's even some of it still preserved in formaldehyde jars, in a couple of museums, across the country. And
were they able to determine what meat it was?
Nobody has done a DNA test on the samples that they currently have in formaldehyde, and I don't know after all this time in a preservative like that whether or not any of the DNA would still be viable enough to take a test. At the time that it fell, which I said was like in the late 1800s, some brave souls actually cooked some of it up and ate it, and said that it tasted to them like tender beef.
Oof.
Yeah, I know. It's boy, yeah, you gotta have some big huevos.
Oh yeah,
to
yes.
do something like
Seriously. Let me make one quick comment. When you mentioned spontaneous combustion, first of all, like you said, what the skeptics say, it's not just some fat guy who fell asleep on his lounge chair or bed and smoking, because two things. One, I think there is just the equal amount of smokers and non-smokers who have died that way. And the second, here is the biggest thing you need to remember. I'm not telling you because you know this. This is for the world, okay? Okay, folks, ladies and gentlemen, remember, if you look at pictures of people who've died by spontaneous combustion, you will see their bed. They're literally burnt to the point where you could see a skull and the outline of the body with ribs and all that. But what do you see with the bed? It's not really damaged except just for that area. It's not burnt to the ground. You don't see the bed springs from the 30s, 50s, 70s. It just doesn't happen. So obviously it's something that makes them burst into fire and doesn't really affect its surroundings. That in itself is something super, super busy. I mean,
very localized, right?
Yeah.
Just interlude on that. I know the oldest case of spontaneous human combustion in England goes back to about 1870. Mm-hmm. And the story goes on an old stagecoach, which was the old post, driving down through the Cotswolds in the southwest of England, going down towards Bristol from London. The stagecoach had stopped, and the gentleman that was on the stagecoach as a passenger, he didn't book the room, and so the inn that they'd stopped at was full. So the good lady made a room up for him in the stables with the horses and then all the hay, and she made a nice bed up for him. But when she came in at about 6 o'clock in the morning, this guy's body had, almost completely gone. And what she noted was that there was this blue flame above the sort of middle part of his body.
Yes.
That was just emanating and floating. And I wondered, you mentioned that you've interviewed a lot of these police, fire brigade. What was their remarks? Did they ever come across any sort of strange flames? Because when I heard about that, it reminded me of the flame of Shiva in Varanasi, on the banks of the burning Ghats there. There's a flame there that's been burning for about 2,500 years. It just gets embers from the dead, but it's sort of replenished. But the flame is not like a sort of red orangey flame that you get with burnt sort of things. It's a blue jet, and I wondered if you'd heard any other strange instances with this spontaneous combustion.
Oh yes. Well, now none of the firemen that I talked to, actually, by the time they got to the bodies, I mean, it was already extinguished, and these people were ashes. But there have been a couple of cases. There was one. It was a homeless person. I can't remember now. I was thinking it was maybe London, but I could be wrong about this. Where the fireman got to this guy, and he was burning, and there was like this bright blue flame, like a torch flame, as the fireman put it, coming out of his stomach area. And it was like there was this fissure that had opened up, and this flame. I mean, they could actually hear it. It was making, like a very strong hissing, loud hissing noise, coming from this guy's stomach. And, unfortunately, he ended up passing away. But, there were other cases very similar to this of people who survived spontaneous combustion because they, somehow they were able to put it out. One guy, he felt what he thought was a bee sting on his leg, and he looked down, and there was this bright blue flame coming from his leg. And, he tried swatting it out, and it wouldn't go out, so he cupped his hand around it and suffocated it. His reasoning was that, he could suffocate it from, lack of oxygen, and that apparently worked. But yeah, I mean, it seems like that any of these cases where people do see the fire, it tends to be, like a blue, like the color of like a natural gas flame.
Agreed. And that again goes totally to the opposite side of what you would think, because when it's blue, that would indicate a different degree. For instance, if you have a fire burning at, say, 300 degrees Fahrenheit versus a fire that's 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to notice a change in the color of the flame. And that's something a lot of people need to really, really recognize. Anyhow, I hate to cut you off and end it, but we are literally about out of time. So first, let me do some plugins. Again, everybody, as you know, if you've been catching us late or you caught on during the halfway break, you've been listening to Dr. J Radio Live with my good old co-host, Johnny Webb, and of course, your humble host, Dr. J, right here in the City of Angels, and Johnny in London, England, United Kingdom, almost 5 a.m. And of course, our guest, Mr. Tim Swartz, who is in Indiana, close to Indianapolis, I believe. But I do want to tell you about the other networks, everybody. Remember, as you know, this is our very own coast-to-coast PM radio network, syndicated with Late Night in the Midlands, PSN Radio, Deep Program Radio, and Pulse Talk Radio, both of those last two in the UK. Also, iTunes, Shoutcast, TuneIn.com, and much, much more to come. Remember to catch the archive of this on YouTube. And every single social media page is what, Johnny? Johnny Webb, what's every social media page? Okay, he's forgetting. It's Dr. J Radio Live, everybody. DRJ Radio Live. Same name that you type in for everything. Now, I want to thank, of course, my team. We got Johnny Webb in the UK, got Tom Schaefer in Miami, and all the other volunteers. And we also have Lou Sheehan here in California. I also want to thank my guest for joining us tonight. And the most important people that need to be thanked are you, the global listeners, taking in this information. Remember, all of this is knowledge is power, and disclosure is only going to happen by you, the people. It's not going to happen from the rest of the governments. The governments are not going to step forward, because why would they want to give up control? So, with that being said, I want to turn over to Tim and do some plugins. Like I said before, you can check out his books via our site. Click on, we'll go to drjradiolive.com, click on books and videos, scroll down to Tim Swartz, and you will see his Amazon authors page, and of course, Timothy Green Beckley's publishing company bookstore. And Tim, with that being said, what final thought do you have to say to everybody? And talk about your books, plug in your radio show one more time, and the Conspiracy Journal.
Yes, it's our website is conspiracyjournal.com, and we put out a weekly email newsletter that's free. So I mean, you can subscribe to it with your email address, on our site. And our Tim Beckley and myself, along with Sean Castile, Paul Eno, Brad Steiger, we got a book coming out, should be out any time now. It's called Amityville and Beyond, The Lore of the Poltergeist and Other Petrifying Paranormal Phenomena. Just keep an eye out on our Amazon page. It should be out soon. I'll tell you something, it's a great book, and I've got some, really interesting new theories when it comes to the poltergeist phenomena. And of course, Tim Beckley and myself, we have our own webcast. It's Exploring the Bizarre on KCOR Radio, and it comes on Thursday nights at 10 o'clock Eastern.
That's right, everybody. You heard it, and make sure you check it out, because in 48 hours from now, his show will officially be over. But 46 hours from now, the show will be just beginning. Make sure you check it out. Tim, we're not going to wait 2 years to bring you back, because we have so much more to talk about. And I told Timothy Green Beckley that since he wanted to jump on with some of his authors, that of course he's more than welcome to come on with his authors. So maybe we can set up both of you next time, but we cannot wait 2 years because you have so much info that 2 hours is not enough. Sorry, it is not enough. So, with that being said, everybody, I hope you have a great night or morning or good day for those of you west of the dateline or east of the UK, where we have a lot of listeners. I'm talking about Indonesia, South Korea, Japan. Anyway, I really appreciate all the feedback from all your guests. And remember, join us tomorrow for the one and only godfather of ufology, Stanton Friedman, and Thursday with Shannon Panzo talking about consciousness and how you can tap into the universal consciousness and have the ability to do things such as have photographic memory and even maybe speak to interdimensional creatures. Just so much, just things that really came from Edgar Mitchell that he sort of picked up on. It's a whole thing you'll hear about later, but that's for later. I just wanted you guys to remember that you have to read Tim's books. They will blow you away. My favorites, because I have them, are the one on Men in Black and Mysteries of the Mojave Desert, which we will talk about much more of those. And when the Amityville books comes out, we definitely will be talking about, because that is a hot topic. Everybody, hang tight, and we will see you very soon. With that being said, this is Dr. J officially signing off.